Hypervigilance is probably one of the things that I struggle with the most. And I didn't know that hypervigilance was a thing. I didn't know that that kind of behavior had a term associated with it. I had no idea where it came from. And up until a certain point, I had no idea how it actually manifested itself in my life. And I think a lot of the growth that I have sort of undergone, I guess, since I started my healing journey has been in developing self awareness. And self awareness is something that narcissists heartily lack, in my opinion. And I think it's something that is difficult for children of narcissistic parents to develop because for so much of our lives, we're entirely preoccupied with the wants and needs and emotions of another person. And so, very rarely, if ever, are we encouraged to kind of look inward and to reflect on our own thoughts and feelings and behavior. There's almost no time for that, and those things just don't matter. They completely pale in comparison to what's going on with your parent. I think there's a bit of a power dynamic there. They are the authority figure in your life. They're kind of telling you what is, and you're sort of forced to subscribe to that way of thinking. Otherwise, your position in the family is going to be very negative, and it's going to be an even more difficult experience. But as I've learned more about narcissism and the long-term effects of narcissistic abuse on adult children of narcissistic parents, I've been able to develop a level of self-awareness that once was completely foreign to me. And it's been so helpful in unlearning a lot of the unhealthy, more toxic behaviors that not only I witnessed and observed throughout my childhood, but also at times that I was called upon to mimic or to really put into practice. And so some of these things, growing up, I always think of it in a very primitive way. I think of a baby animal and how they learn to walk and how they learn to hunt. And they do it through observation. They're watching the behaviors and the actions of other adults in their lives, and then they're mimicking those same things to learn how to best survive. And so if you apply that to a parent-child relationship when you're dealing with a narcissistic parent, naturally, I think some kids are going to pick up on some really toxic behaviors and start to implement them completely seamlessly into their life as they move into adulthood, as they encounter healthy relationships, and they won't even know. And that was the case for me where, I was very defensive when I was first in a healthy relationship. And I was very hypervigilant. That was one of the things that I came to realize much later on down the road after I had started to develop this self-awareness. And there were a number of different occasions where, I would just be sitting next to my husband and I would notice that he hadn't taken a sip of his coffee for too long. And I would ask, "Oh, is it cold? Do you want me to heat it up for you?" Because I'm not paying attention to my own cup of coffee and whether or not that's hot, but I'm paying more attention to him. Hypervigilance also manifests itself in my life, and especially when I first started to recognize this behavior and before. If I were to ask my partner to do something, right? If I wanted to go out somewhere or to watch a movie or to listen to a particular song, that process of just asking and sort of making my wants or needs known already made me very uncomfortable. But then I would notice that as we were at this place or watching this movie or listening to this song, I wasn't even actually paying attention to what was going on. All of my attention and energy was focused on my partner and whether or not they were enjoying themselves. And it made me really think about this the other day when I was working on something with my husband, and he was unscrewing a bunch of screws from this thing, and I was waiting there to kind of catch them as he was taking them out. And I remember thinking to myself in that moment, well, I don't want to put my hand out too soon because I don't want him to feel rushed or pressured. It's like, come on, the clock is ticking, hurry up. But then I also didn't want to wait too long and maybe have him feel like I wasn't fully present with him. I wasn't in the moment or I wasn't interested in the project that we were working on. And that, to me, just took it to an entirely different level, but it really kind of summarized hypervigilance in a nutshell for me, because it's not even just thinking about being there in that experience and putting your hand out, but it's sort of hyperfixating on when you do it, trying to perfect the timing so that the other person feels entirely comfortable, because so many of us, I think, for so long, were just completely overwhelmed with what was important to another person. And we never wanted to do anything less than that. We always wanted to be sort of meeting and exceeding those expectations. And the only way that I think a lot of us were able to do that throughout our childhood was through practice and through sort of fine tuning. Just the more hyper aware that you are, the more that you're able to pay attention to every little thing that's going on, the better your experience is going to be when you're dealing with a narcissistic parent. And hypervigilance is definitely one of those things that has been very difficult for me to let go of. I still have pretty much all of those impulses that I once did, but I no longer act on them, because I know now, being in a healthy relationship, that if my partner wants or needs something from me, then he will communicate those needs directly. And I think, this way of thinking is really hard to change, and it's hard to believe the latter, because emotionally immature parents in general, I think one of the key characteristics of their personality and their relationships is sort of lying in wait and taking into consideration, or at least logging, the amount of time that might pass before someone does or says something that they're anticipating, right? So if you're dealing with a parent-child relationship, a parent might want something from their child. They might expect something, right? That maybe was communicated in the past. Maybe they said it in passing, just a passing comment, and the child was supposed to have picked up on that, but they didn't. Not only will a narcissistic parent not say, hey, can you do this thing? They won't communicate that directly. But from the time they realize that you're not meeting those expectations, a clock starts ticking. And they're taking into account now how much time is going to pass before you realize that you didn't do the thing that I wanted you to do. And the longer that goes on, the worse it is for you. And so that hypervigilance is just so drilled into so many of us, I think, throughout our childhood, that the idea of a relationship with another person where communication is open and honest and direct seems so completely foreign that even when you're exposed to it, it's hard to believe that it's true. Because maybe you think, at least for me, I remember feeling sometimes like, okay, well, maybe they say that everything is fine now, but in a little while, they're actually going to bring this back up because they were disappointed with me then, and they're going to kind of use it when it best suits them. And it's a hard one. Hypervigilance is a hard one to let go of. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I am not a professional. I don't claim to be one, but a therapist once told me that I am an expert in my own experience. And I want to speak about these topics candidly so that anyone who has experienced or is currently experiencing something like it knows a little bit more about what to expect, how to respond, and that you're not alone.